Mount a snow bike kit to this YZ450, which is the most popular snow bike, and people only ride YZ450s. But whether you're building a KTM, Honda, Kawaski, Suzuki, it's all pretty much the same, the assembly part. We're going to mount a timbersled 129 Aero to this bike. We're going to go through all the steps to make this thing a wicked awesome snow bike. The 2018 timbersled Aero 129 with a 2.5-inch track. We have our ski and our third shock. Timbersled Trio makes our forks a lot stiffer, so we're not going to have to go into the forks and change spring rates or revalve anything. We're just going to add this shock, and that'll take care of the forks. This is probably a typical way of a lot of people buy. Like with this build, everything's used. The kit's a 2018, the bike's 2014. This kit originally was on a KTM, so we're going to switch the kit around. We have a fit kit for it. I feel like this is how a lot of people end up buying, especially their first one. You don't want to go out and buy a brand new one just to find out you don't like it. Or if you just want to save some money, you can buy a used one. Seen the kit. Now we have our fit kit to mount this snow bike kit directly to our bike. We have the fork clamps and bolts. And then this is to fit the track kit in place of the swing arm. This replaces our rear shock. And we have various spacers to make it fit correctly. We're going to run hour meter. You put a lot of hours on it as a snow bike. This thing's going to run like 6-7 hours a day probably. So you really want to keep track of your hours for oil changes. We have a set of seal savers. The fork guards won't fit anymore, and this protects snow and ice from getting up in your fork seals. Very handy. We have one of the best things you can ever put on a snow bike, a Seat Concepts Element seat. This is their waterproof, basically their snow bike seat. It's wider, it's cushion, it has more cushion, and it's their most water resistant seat. So this thing is it's a real ass saver. We have heated handlebars. So we're going to pipe coolant from the bike through the handguards. We have a thermostat to keep the engine temperatures up. Being a motocross bike, they don't come with a thermostat. Trying to keep them cool. Come the winter, we need to keep them warm. So thermostat with some fittings, heated bars. Engine's going to keep the bars warm. We have Sparkbuster style handguards. Super handy for when you're smashing through the bush. You don't get your hand crushed against a tree. And then we have a snow shield for it. One for the front. We'll end up shielding the bike in a little later as we go. These are your basics for what you're going to want to use to build a snow bike. Let's get started. I'm going to take the rear wheel off, the shock and the swing arm, and get the track fitted to the bike first. You might hear the heater in the background. I hope not, but it's really cold outside. I think it's minus 49,000, and I don't want to freeze to death in here. I'll put the rear axle back in the rear wheel. That way I know exactly where it is come spring. Next, I'm going to pull the rear brake system off the bike. Anything like a spring or something, I'm just going to zip tie it to the part so I can find it again. You're not going to need the mud flap. Let's get it out of the way. Next up, I'm going to pull this bolt out, and that'll get my swing arm off without my linkage. I see some people leave the shock, linkage, rear wheel all together for the winter, which is fine, but for me, it just takes up a lot of room and it doesn't store very well. So I like to take it off in a couple major pieces. Get this guy off. You are going to need to keep your swing arm pivot bolt because this is what holds your kit on your bike. So you can't put it back in your swing arm for storage. You need to keep it. Up next, the top shock bolt needs to come out. Swing arm. Okay, we have our swing arm and shock all out of the way. Let's get the kit on. These scissor lifts are the handiest I've found for putting snow bikes together, except they're very sketchy with nothing on the back. They like to tip over. Like this. Get her lowered down, get this track installed. Before we go and slide this up to the bike, it's a great time to loosen off our pinch bolts and our chain adjuster. Make sliding this all the way back, put the shortest chain possible on. And we're also going to go ahead and put our fixed strut in. This is the one that came on the bike from a KTM. This is the one from my Yamaha. As you can see, they are slightly different lengths. You want to make sure you have the right strut length for your bike. this is a great time for some help, but if you're by yourself, I like to put a T-handle in my swing arm pivot bolt from the other side, just to help line things up. Other side, go ahead and handle it, maybe. With the kit connected at the swing arm pivot bolt, I'm going to go ahead and jack the bike back up, which will pull this strut, this fixed strut, back out of its hole so I can put some bushings on it. So you have these. One goes on each side of this heim joint. Now that I have my strut rod adjusted to the proper length to get the angles that I wanted, I can go ahead and adjust my chain. And I got lucky that my chain is now in basically the right adjustment. So I'm going to go ahead and lock down. There's two pinch bolts in here, pinch bolt up here and a pinch bolt in here that you access from the right hand side of the bike, and then a stopper bolt. With this particular setup on the timbersled Arrow, they give you a new front axle. So I'm going to put the factory one back in here so I don't lose it. If your kit doesn't come with a master cylinder, I prefer the front brake as my track brake. Some people prefer the factory rear brake to run the track, but either or, you just connect your line, bleed it as you would, and you're good to go. So here we can see this is the one that comes with it. I'll route this up through the bike and attach it where my factory front brake was. Then pull our fork guards off, and we'll be needing them. I'm going to slide the fork guards out next so I can slide these seal savers down over. Now would be the time, if you don't already have one, is while your forks are off and put your seal savers on. Put yourself a toe strap on. Okay, with my fork off, I just take my seal savers. With my fork off, I just take my seal. With my fork off, I can just take my seal saver, slide over the top of my fork, and all the way down. Okay, ready to put the ski on. We're going to put these two spacers in the spindle that came with the fit kit. Then the axle that was supplied with the kit as well. I've oiled this a little bit just as if it was going back on a dirt bike, so nothing gets seized together. We'll slide our front axle in, and then instead of a nut, they use this bolt. So we're just going to leave everything loose until we get pretty much everything together. Plastic collar to protect our fork tubes from the clamps, one on each side with this ring up. This is for a timber sled. This is a timber sled thing. If you have a Yeti, the aluminum just bolts or just clamps directly to your fork tubes. Next, our clamps with our ridge up to let the ridge in our plastic collar stay recessed down below. You need this ridge up because it protects your seal, your dust seal, when it comes down. It has a place to go. Outer clamp for this side. Timber sled uses this in the rear, little anti-seize on these threads because they're going to go into aluminum, and we don't want them to corrode and never get them out again. And then I'm going to tighten everything down in the reverse order that I installed it. I'm going to start with these, then I'll do my axle, my pinch bolts, then the ski is on. All right. Without the fender on, this would bolt like so. And you can see how it all works. This bracket will all be hidden by the fender. You can see how it adds an air shock into the forks. This bottom chamber is for the bottoming, and then this top chamber is for your overall stiffness. So you can tune it to ride soft and yet still have good bottoming. Go ahead and get these bolts, fender, lined up. Okay, I'd already gone ahead and done the bottom, but you just pull this bottom bolt out. There's a cube spacer in there that comes out, and then the trio goes in. Put the bolt back in. Just got to tighten that bolt up. So I guess in order to run this up through here, I'm going to have to probably pull the tank and a rad shroud off. I'm going to try and do this without having to open this, as it's bled right now, and I don't want to have to bleed these brakes. Up through this big hole. And hopefully I can, oh, why is this still so jangled? Okay. And hopefully I can run it up through here under the fuel tank. See if I can pull this fork tube low enough that I can hook or slide this brake line through. That'll be a pretty cool trick if I can do this. Oh. I'm having to compress the fork while doing this. Oh, you can. Slide my brake line through and let my fork go back up. Get my bleeder to the top. Set my fork height the same as the other side, which is right at the first line. Okay, well, that was a fun trick. Now we can go ahead and put this up here. Now that we've tied up the brake line, and we've checked the routing and making sure nothing's going to pinch when we turn. Okay, at this point, the bike is rideable as a snow bike. You know how to install the kit, you know how to install the ski, how to run the brake line, install the chains, and you could go ride this thing as a snow bike. Up next, we have the heated handlebars. We're going to go ahead and strip all these parts. We're going to go and strip these handlebars right down, get them off the bike. This loop, and then on to here. We need to pull this shroud off in order to get to the coolant hoses so we can get to the thermostat that we're going to be installing. Get rid of our nice silicone blue hoses for this ugly mess. So what we have going on with this mess is, let's get this line out of the way. Get this line up here. Okay. So we have hot coolant flowing out of our cylinder head, and it stops at our thermostat. We run hot coolant out before the thermostat to our heated bars, and then it recirculates back into here on the other side of the thermostat. So it's just kind of a bypass for the thermostat to keep coolant flowing. This is also a thermostat bypass. This thermostat will deadhead the engine. This way, coolant is always circulating through the engine. It's bypassing the rads. Once the thermostat opens, coolant flows up this pipe into the rads, circulates as it would. It's the temp gauge, so we can monitor the hot coolant coming out of the engine. Of course, these fuel-injected four-strokes really like to run hot. To get the fuel injection and everything running properly, you want to keep your bike temps above 180 or so degrees Fahrenheit, just to maintain proper fueling. If not, the bike thinks the bike is too cold, and they're still trying to warm up, so they dump extra fuel in, which is not great for peak performance. Because motocrossers, for the most part, were designed to try and stay cool. These bikes run cool in the snow, so trying to build a snowmobile out of a dirt bike takes a lot of extra parts to try and make them run right. Everything being open, exposed, snow gets in everywhere, cools them down super fast. So we're going to do a lot of extra stuff to try and keep the temps in this bike. Next, I need to pull this lower rad hose off to put the bypass in. This will allow coolant to bypass the thermostat and pump right back into the engine without any restriction, and the hot coolant circulating through the engine and moving at all times. So this is the hose we're going to use. It's going to go between our lower rad hoses and pump coolant directly back into the engine. There, get this side put back on. Yamaha routes the crankcase breather hose out of the valve cover, around and down to the bottom of the frame here. And this area gets full of ice and snow. So I just cut it short. I keep the hose right up against the water pump here. That way the heat off the coolant lines will keep this from freezing over, and it vents. If this freezes over, you blow the seals and the plugs out of your valve cover usually. Wrecks your day. Now I've already routed and fitted all this stuff because this bike was a snow bike last year. This is your first year doing a snow bike. Prepare a lot of time to do this. All this hose routing and fitting. And okay, we have our lines run. This line comes up here. It's going to go in front of the fork tube and hook into this guy right here, like so. The other line, the return line, actually runs, it flows the other way, but it comes out of here and goes across the valve cover. It runs across the valve cover, under here, Runs up through the rad, ties into this cable holder. It runs around the fork tube and ties into here. And I found with this line, you can't make a real sharp bend, and I just find going around the fork tube, it'll be way tighter. But it just keeps it from getting pinched. That's about the only way I found that works good. Stuff is it's actually transport truck airline. It's super tough. All these fittings are just quick connect. You just push them in. It's hard to do with one hand on a swivel fitting, but you just push them in. You can't pull them out, and you can push this little lock in and get them back out. Work better on this one. So we'll just push this in. There we go. And then you can't get it back out. That's it. It's in. And see, lots of people say about these lines breaking and getting sprayed with hot coolant, but this is transport truck. This is DOT rated safety. Stuff doesn't just break. You could literally yank on. You can hang the bike off this line once it's connected properly. Stuff doesn't just break. I mean, minus 40 or 50. Yes, it gets a bit fragile, but like, we're not snow biking in that temp. I've yet to have one break. When I do, I'll let you know. My plan for blocking the radiators off is to run small bungee cords across the front of them. Then I can slide a piece of essentially duct tape down in front of them. All I've been using for the past few seasons is Gorilla Tape to block off my rads. The best part is if I lose one, I'll just make another one, and they're flexy, it doesn't break, they're easy to get on and off. So this is how I do it. It's a good thing about these is they don't cost a lot. I need to make another one. Not that big a deal. Now I've gone and put bungee cords across my rad shroud, drilling a couple holes, poking them through. And then I can slide this guy. It's a little long. So, well, maybe not. If you do it this way, is this tabby will get hooked on top here. So I can slide it, pull the bungee cords out, slide this guy down. This is some super low budget, but I mean, I've tried making them out of hard plastic and I've thought about buying, like, they make these nicer clip-on ones and stuff, but then you have to unclip them, and if you lose it, you're not going to just be able to clip it back on. I'm on a 2-day trip and I lose one of these, I'll just go to my truck and make a new one for the next day. And the one thing I like is, say I'm riding up the trail and the bike starts to get hot, I can just reach down. I'll just reach in here and pull them out. I can fold it up. I'll fold it up while I'm riding and just stuff it in my bar pad or something. Rad blockers out. I can just keep riding, and then next time we stop, I'll put it away. I'm going to replace it with a dry air filter. So we're going to ride in snow, and we don't need any oil in our air filter. So I'm just going to put a dry one on for now. I'd like to later in the season probably put an actual intake into this bike. But I've done this. I did this last year and it worked okay, and I know lots of people that do it this way. So is it the best? No. Does it work? Yes. So dry air filter. I'm just going to put a pre-filter on it. This one is fortunately for KTM. We're just going to drop this dry air filter in here, and then we will cover it with a pre-filter. It's not exactly the right one, but it does fit. It's just a little too big, but tucked in here. Last up on the list for this build is our seat concept seats. This is one of the best investments you can make on a snow bike. At least I think so. It's just such a beautiful seat. Like, I have not rode this bike since snow biking last winter, and I rode it one time. Then I did a top end in it, so it really hasn't run much. Didn't really run all summer. Oh, we're in gear. Temp gauge works, and that my heated bars are circulating, and then I can top my coolant up. We've got the YZ450 build all wrapped up. As you can see, she's ready to rock and roll. We had her out in the mountains last weekend, and this thing worked well. To change on it now, it's going to run the rest of the season just the way it is. The only thing we didn't really see was we got the hour meter installed. I got these big bar muffs on it, which whoever's riding its hands dry. And if you tip over in the snow, it keeps a lot of snow from building up on your clutch lever. I also like it just for keeping snow off the throttle tube. Even with the heated bars, just can keep the snow off it. Saves things from getting frozen. You can see our temp gauge is hiding up in here. It only works when the bike's running. Got the valve for the heated bars right here to turn them off and on. We got our pull strap mounted on here for when you're stuck. Got the trio mount up in there all hidden. Seal savers on. Our timbersled riot spindle and ski installed. Snow shield in the front. It's super high tech with a couple of zip ties, but keeps snow from blowing up and on top of the engine. We have the snow shields. We have a blanket on the left side and on the back of the engine. I haven't got one on the right side of the engine yet with the kickstart and the header there. It's pretty messy, so I might just leave the right side off. One in the back, shielding the back of the engine from snow, is going to do the most work with keeping our oil temps up, in turn keeping our engine temps up. You can see we got our Seat Concept seat on here, looking fine. Got my gas cam mounted on here. Originally, I think these ones use like a snowboard binding strap, but this one was gone and missing, so I just have this endless ratchet strap. This way it's absolutely going nowhere. Got a storage box on here, and that's it. This snow bike build is done, and look forward to getting out and riding it and having other people be able to come out and enjoy this one. If you happen to be in the Calgary area and you want to go snow biking, or you can get to the Calgary area, I'll take you out. Let's go.